Hello, selectors, and welcome back to the Lifeburst Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andrew.
I'm Tiffany. Welcome back to the Lifeburst Podcast, a Wixoss podcast where we talk about all the Wixoss things and only the Wixoss things.
That's true. So we
Did it. Got through it.
You got there. So selectors, you guys have wanted to go back to our GP primer that we were putting out. We said we were going to do a couple more videos. We are. This is the second of 3 videos that we're going to be putting out.
Welcome to part 2.
So we're going to be talking about more deck lists and also just like how things are probably going to be. But before we go really ham on it, there's 2 other things to discuss. The first, as always, we enjoy your comments, guys. And you guys commented last week on our videos, and I wanted to highlight a few of them.
Let's do it.
So the first one is from Ocdillon, who says that he likes Nova as a hard counter to Bruno, because you can put Nova in that center lane where Bruno's going to be. It's going to balance Bruno back to their hand no matter what. No discard happening there. Plus, you get to have a Nova in your hand for next turn.
Sounds good.
So it's actually
pretty good.
Yeah, pretty cool idea. While this next one is from whom?
Atelier.
So speaking of our pronunciations here, we got a corrected pronunciation for giant squid. And
Okay.
what is it?
Okay. It is pronounced Daiho-ika. Daiho-ika. Literally giant squid. Thank you for educating us and not letting us go too far sounding like idiots. We really appreciate pronunciation corrections in the comment section down below. It is very helpful. So thank you, Atelier.
And we got another comment, too, from The Real McQuaid, saying that Bang has been an amazing include in Anne, something, that we were struggling with trying to figure out how to build an Anne. It basically becomes a discard 2 and draw 2 on turn 3, which I did consider as being a pretty good thing to do. It basically lets you really sort your hand, sometimes even hide some stuff that you want more powerful away for later. You might not need the level 3 on turn 1. But then you might, on turn 3, need that level 3. So if you sneak it into the enter, it can't be discarded. So you've got it for
there
later.
You go.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Pretty cool.
Well, thank you, selectors, for your comments. They are very helpful to us, and I know that other selectors appreciate reading them as well.
Yeah, and let's jump into the next point, which is just a real quick recap. How was your Wixoss week, Tiffany?
It was actually kind of busy.
Yeah.
We went out, and we went to a ceremony. One of our locals. We got to play with some people that we don't get to see very often, which was a lot of fun. I took Cosmos, which I really enjoy, and I actually think I played some pretty good games.
Yes,
quite frankly.
And one of our selectors at our locals brought a very cool Tama build. That's not your normal Tama build, and it did really well. It took first place. I lost to them, and I was playing Adams. I got second place with that Atomic Deus. And I'll be posting that list, not the Atomic Deus list, but the first place ceremony list. But, what was really cool was I really, really wanted the Xeno cluster. But they said they would give me the Xeno cluster for some of the other prizes. So we made the trade, so we're gonna have that Xeno cluster. It's not here yet because there's some mix-up in the shipping.
Yeah, it got delayed.
Yeah, but we'll get it soon.
Yeah.
And I'll be very excited for it.
Yes. Finally.
I know. I've been questing for that really a long time.
Hey, selectors, did you know it's a really good idea to make friends with your fellow selectors? Because this is also a trading card game.
Yeah, I'm very happy that they were willing to trade it for me.
Yes, it's very awesome.
I'm super thankful.
Shouts out. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's talk about the GP. Last time, just a recap from almost a month ago now. We talked about the sort of like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. You'll see that up on the screen here. If you guys want to learn more about like it as we dive deeper into it, you can go watch the old video. But yeah, we're going to be talking about like, we're going down on the list and we're going to be talking about basically all of these, but we're not doing them in any specific order. Because realistically, we talked about the futility of trying to be like, I'm only prepping for tier 1 decks. You're going to run into some random tier 3.
Listen, we've explained this before, but Wixoss is definitely a game where people want to bring tier 1 decks, but they will also bring their favorite center.
Yeah.
And that could be anybody. So there's just, there's things that you can expect, but there's also going to be things you can't expect. So we're doing these in no particular order.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that like a lot of the times the Japanese meta is not necessarily a one-for-one translation for the US meta. So you have to take some things in stride and recognize some cards. Sometimes some things are better than they are here. You know, in the Japanese meta, there's barely any green decks whatsoever. There's a fair amount of green decks in the American meta. I think we just know how to, you know, kind of use it. We talked about Dasharana. I'm just clicking through them all real quick. We talked about the blue control decks that you're likely going to face, as well as some blue tempo decks that you're likely going to face, and what kind of the breakdown is for all of those decks as to how they also kind of function and sample deck lists, which brings us back to this week, which is the green enter decks that we're going to be talking about.
Woohoo! You guys know that we're fans of green decks.
The funny thing is sort of this like architectural green deck has sort of existed now in Japan for a little while, but didn't exist in the earlier metas. So you basically see it vacant from Japanese meta. However, a lot of American metas have latched on to what it is. And sort of been able to run it to great success. I don't want to like toot our own horn here, but I think you and I had something to do with it as well, because we championed a lot of the green meta stuff.
I mean, we still do.
Yeah, as a little anti-meta too.
Yeah,
because it is anti-meta. Like
I mean, it is. Yeah.
So green has issues for it. Like, right? Let's talk about that. Green has some issues for it, but it counters some of the blue-white things that are going around. Blue-white is very, very strong. But you got to be maybe doing the correct green things in order to really be pulling that off. But we'll talk about the pros and cons, right? That's the first thing we're going to do when we talk about these types of decks. And what is our pros and cons for this?
So for green enter decks, the list of pros is going to be that they are tough to hate out. They have a strong effect with more enter, go figure. And they are more attuned to attrition.
Yes.
The cons is that it is uninteractive, highly dependent on a secondary color, which we'll be getting into. And it also has an inflexible game plan.
Yeah. So let's break those down one by one, right?
Okay.
Like, it's tough to hate out. Why would that be the case for green?
I think it's... if I was going to really think about it, green is tough to hate out because it's not like a super strong color. So like there's no reason to hate it out.
Sure, yeah, there's not a ton of targeted things that are going specifically at green, right?
I mean,
let's
yeah.
think of Xenocluster, right? What are the two things that Xenocluster counters?
Discard and enter burn.
Right, and that's usually what you're trying to counter with these things. And let's be real, Wixoss decks are pretty tight on their enter budget at all points in time.
They are.
So it's like getting the 3 enter back from an enter burn deck might be able to push you over the edge, or getting 3 cards back against a discard deck might be able to push you over the edge with your really well budgeted out resources. But green decks sort of don't care.
They don't.
Right? Like, you make them discard. If you built your green deck correctly, they don't really care because they are like, that's fine, I have ways to get more cards. Right? Same thing with enter. If you're like enter burning them, they're like, that's fine.
I'm literally an enter charge deck.
I just get a bunch of enter.
You're wasting your time.
It's like funny when I played the bang deck against like an enter burn deck, I just basically go, cool, I won't do all my extra cool fun things that I do. I'll just do my normal game plan. But because your deck is built on making a normal deck unable to function, this deck is not unable to function. I'm going to be able to use those resources.
Yeah.
Because like they'll burn you 5 or 6 enter, but you'll be gaining 5 or 6 enter. So you just have
it really
is
like a net zero.
Right, a normal game of Wixoss gets played instead. is what happens.
Yeah.
But since the enter charge deck is basically putting 0 effort or 0 resources into gaining those resources, they'll win because they're better. They're spending their stuff better, right? And that's why it's kind of hard to hate out. Like, it's just, what are you going to do to stop a green deck? I mean, the real answer to stopping a green deck probably is basically like just negating things on the field, right? Like Coel is a pretty good card against a green deck because you're just like, well, when you go to attack phase, I'm going to vanilla something out, and it probably is like, well, I want to be able to do removal on attack, or I want to be able to Lancer or Assassin or Enter Charge on attack. You know, negating those things out is not great for the green deck.
Yep.
But yeah, it's difficult to hit out. That's one of the pros for it.
Yes. The other one is the strong effect with more enter. I think that kind of speaks for itself, where if you have more money, you can buy more things.
Yeah, it's
if
true.
we're just going to talk about it in like very standard layman's terms. That not to mention there's a lot of cards that like for green specifically that have green effects that just cost more enter. Like if I were to think about the first one that comes to mind would be like Influence D.
Yeah.
Which is 3 green, 3 anything. It's a huge cost, and half of it is strictly green enter. So with that in mind, like outside of you doing all of your regular like colorless costs and having more enter with that, like there are other specifically green abilities that will cost more that won't feel as bad.
Yeah, and you can put your eggs in more baskets, right?
Yeah.
By doing stuff that's just better. Like, so for example, Madoka Clap is a great 3-stop. We've talked about this. It's to the end, right? Like, it is a great 3-stop. However, a lot of the times, these decks that are able to 3-stop with it usually don't have the enter against the aggro decks to do a 3-stop. They usually do a 2-stop, right? They pay 2 enter and they discard 2 cards, right? With a green deck where you're probably have a couple cards in hand regardless of what the opponent is doing when you're making them discard, but you almost always have that 5 enter. So it's almost always going to be a 3-stop for a green deck. Whereas the blue control decks, it might only be a 2-stop. Right. You've got that safety in being like, this will
go off every time.
Right.
Exactly.
And then you've got stuff like that too. Like, for example, Osagetsune costs 2 to do its effect. And green reliably does it. Green's one of those ones where, we talk about like how it's better to have something at the cost of 1. Green's like, yeah, that's fine. I'll still pay 2 and get it done.
Yeah.
I've got the extra enter kicking
Green's
around.
got change to throw.
Yeah.
Now, what about attrition? Can you explain that one to us?
Sure. So like that can be a weakness on its own too. There's very few, and I hesitate to say this, right? Because you can make an aggressive green deck and you can make a controlling green deck, and arguably you can make a combo green deck, right? Like we've seen people put Wolf together and do a Wolf card jockey deck and manage to be, top 32 with it before. But it is when green is at its best, in my opinion, right? That is that green ends up being this deck that it's going to take its time to win, no matter what, because it's just going to attrition you out. It's basically like it loves being in the late game with an opponent who now is running out of resources, and green's just like, I just
still
keep
has
going.
resources.
Yeah, green is the little engine that could, man. Like it just keeps going regardless.
It might not be fast and it might not be big, but that's true. The enter will kind of last you through the longer games.
Right. Let's look at like Energy Door, right? Which is arguably one of green's best cards.
Oh, thank goodness we got Energy Door.
It allows you to vanish out an opponent's signature, so it opens a lane, right? But it also draws you cards, and it also prevents damage, and it also gives you enter if you need it. But generally speaking, you just get the cards and the damage prevention. It's just like, look at that. You try to discard me. Boom. I've got the 2 extra cards here. Oh, that's enough for me to get going. Okay, cool. I've got Lancer. I'm piercing through. Let's go. It's just like it has a very steady clock. Like the clock doesn't speed up.
Yeah.
Or slow down for anyone. It's just like, I'm just going to keep trying to do this. And
slow
eventually,
and steady.
Eventually I'll get there.
Yeah. Very tortoise-tude.
That sort of like pairs with its weakness here, which is its inflexible game plan. Again, it's not really doing anything different game to game.
That's true. Yeah, this isn't like your standard green enter deck is not going to feel like how I describe the Ott Center Ancient Surprise decks, where that feels like a gas pedal and you can like speed up and slow down and you can kind of switch around your game plans. The standard green enter deck is not like that. It has its one way of doing things and it's going to do it in its own time, and that's the way it's going to be.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to react to what your opponent is throwing at you. Especially in a place like GPs where you're going to be going up against a lot of different decks and for probably longer turns.
Yeah, your goal is basically to say, well, I hope my my deck is just literally strong enough in its attrition game plan that it does not matter that I'm not really doing very much flexibility on this, because I'm just going to do one good thing and if it's good enough, it'll get me there.
Right.
And that could be true. One of the other things that we talked about here is that it's uninteractive, right? And what does that mean? Unlike red, which is screwing with your opponent's enter, unlike blue, which is screwing with your opponent's cards in hand, unlike white, which is kind of screwing with combat math on the board, right? With like Exia and Coelas and things. Green doesn't really offer you anything to do with your opponent. Like, you know, and I'm sure there could be comments down below where people are like, well, you can get life cloth back in your
you can, but that's still on your side of the board.
Yeah, and it's
like
also,
you can do stuff like Lancer, but again, that's on your side of the board.
Yeah.
Going forward, that's not you interacting with your opponent's
Right.
board to disrupt.
And the life cloth is like pretty inefficient in green right now. I'm sure there is some efficient stuff in All-Star, but it's not here.
Yeah.
But like there also is some amount of green cards that do interact with like what's going on with your opponent. Like for example, Gouache, if you remember that card from a million years ago. It basically can throw out another Signy in defense. And there's a lot of these examples of green Signy that are like, I'm defensive, and your opponent's going to do stuff, and I'm going to be like, nah, look at this. I got another Signy that I'm putting out on the field. Gap Bear combo, for example. But they're all really inefficient. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's only one that stands out to me as it does interact with the opponent and interacts the opponent favorably with very little interaction on, like very little investment on your end. And that's Quinn, right?
Oh yeah.
Quinn swaps around your opponent during your opponent's Signies on their attack phase and gives negative 2,000.
Yeah, it's not a very popular card.
No, if it was negative 3,000, I'd be playing it all over the place. But negative 2,000 is not quite enough to really be making an impact. But the swapping around the field is, because that messes with their combat math.
Yeah. All right. Now, going to the last con, it's highly dependent on a secondary color. I mean, this is kind of the unfortunate truth of green, is that it really is not a color in this format that can stand on its own 2 feet. That's for a multitude of reasons. We've been told by multiple selectors that one of the main reasons is that Wixoss in the previous formats, green was really, really strong. So they're not giving it a whole lot of support in this format because they're trying to kind of like even things out a bit, which is understandable. But, you know, as a person that only plays the Diva format, I'm like, come on.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, you know, like if a card gets printed for Diva, it gets printed for All-Star as well, right? Like that's something that people forget. And we're English, you know, here where we only have Diva cards.
Yeah.
So, you know, when a really good card exists in the Diva format, it will go to the All-Star format as well.
Yeah.
Great. Good for them. You know,
I can understand it. But due to that, green just does not have a lot of like independent support for its own color.
Yeah.
That does make it a very good, or it makes it a relatively sturdy and decent like splash color.
Yeah.
There are certain colors that interact very well with green, and green interacts very well with certain colors.
You have to have like a reason for it, right?
Yeah.
Like there's really only 2 cards right now that I can think of that I'm like, I would put green in a deck regardless of what's going on with that deck because I just want access to this. And it's Energy Door and Mel. Like Mel because Mel prevents damage. And those are 2 good reasons, right? Outside of that, though, I don't know what cards I really want to put in the main deck other than Chirin that I would be excited for in green. But there's a few. But really it ends up being, if you're building a main green deck, you're probably minimizing how much green is in the deck. You're probably going 16 to 18 green cards in the deck, and that's it. And there's you become dependent on your other color, right? Like green doesn't offer very much on its own, right? Like you need to add blue, black, or white into the deck to get it to that point where it can be very attrition based and then can win those late games. You notice I didn't say red, by the way.
Yeah. Why is that?
Red green ends up being very stompy and wants to be aggressive, and that just doesn't work. Like green just doesn't have the cards to support that.
Yeah, I agree.
The most that you're getting out of that is playing a red aggro deck with some extra enter.
All right. So now that we've gone over the pros and cons of the deck, let's take a deeper look Going on to our next slide, we've got Song of Vogue 3 and Bang Making a Miracle.
Yeah, these are basically your main two currently. Your main two green decks that you're going to be seeing when they pop up, right? Bang is basically able to give Lancer to anything, which is why it's really good. Phalaris, and then the
Ouch.
it's crazy. Then the once per game gives something S Lancer. It's one of the unique ways to win a game without having to like really commit to the board too much. So S Lancer can basically just win you the game, right? That's pretty cool. Senga, on the other hand, rewards you for being a green deck that's not playing very much green, which is cool,
Oh, that's true.
right? Because Senga wants you to be playing like
Rainbow.
a rainbow. So it's
Meaning like 3 different colors is what we mean by that.
right. So it's rewarding you for not playing completely green, which is what you want to do right now anyways. And the reward for that is drawing an extra card or charging an extra one. And like you said, like it's continuous. So it ends up being like constant.
Yeah, so honestly, not a bad thing to have against a deck that either wants to discard you or enter burn you.
Yep.
It kind of solves both of those issues.
Yeah, so but the next slide is really the one that we need to spend a little bit of time talking
All
about.
right.
So this is Mel from set 9 that will be coming out, which I think comes out next month, like June-ish.
It'll be here before the GP, so that's kind of
Cool.
why we're getting into this stuff early.
Correct. So Mel is something that we've been testing with a little bit on our own here. We've got our gauntlet that we're going messing around with, and Mel has shown a lot of promising results. I think Mel is better than. So I think Senga is a pretty good green choice if you decide that you want to go with it because it just gives you constant resources, but it lacks a little bit of punch to win the game. That punch that wins the game is available in Bang, which makes Bang really good, but the main downside to Bang is that it's once per game costs green, which means that you need to be at least 20 green to function.
Yeah. And as we've stated previously, that's probably not the most optimal deck.
Yeah.
Ironically, for green decks.
Mel, on the other hand, it gives up one notable thing, which is kind of sad. It gives up some amount of enter charge, but you can make up for that in the main deck. I just said that like the best card of the deck is Jiren, which enter charges you. So it's not like it's a super big loss, but you get a lot of other things going for it. In mostly that you get coins and you also get accessories. So let's talk about some of these things. Why don't we go ahead and, Tiff, do you mind reading the level 3 Mel?
Sure. It is a level 3, and its enter is add a Kechacha code eat, backfat mashi mashi code eat, and a soft boiled egg code eat to your Lurig deck. Action, 1 enter, make a craft signy from your Lurig deck into an accessory of target signy on your field, and then action once a game. Your opponent cannot use spells or action abilities until the end of their next turn.
Right. So an accessory is also something that you can get. You can attach it to a signy, and it's similar to how souls function.
But it is not a soul.
It is not a soul. It is slightly different, right? Souls give the effects to the signy. Therefore, if you vanilla out the signy, they lose the ability. Accessories don't work like that. They have the thing, and like the signy is basically borrowing it. So it can't. If you vanilla out a signy,
these are more like objects. Like you can't vanilla out an object.
right?
You can vanilla out a signy, not an object.
Yeah, that signy, for example, will be vanillaed out. Will have no rules text whatsoever, but it will still have these abilities because the accessories attached to them.
So let's go through some of the accessories.
Yeah.
These are so fun. First of all,
Note that they are signies with powers and levels. That doesn't matter in the slightest. Like,
that's so weird.
It's just a weird thing in Wixoss.
It's just a weird Wixoss thing.
They come in attached, therefore they're objects. They do not have levels or powers.
Yeah. So the first one is Kechacha code eat, and it says that the signy accessorized with this gets plus 10,000 power.
Yes. Also worth mentioning, accessories. You can only have one accessory per signy.
Okay, yeah.
So you can't load
You can only
them up.
hold one thing at a time.
Yeah, you know.
The next one is, let's say, Backfat, which is the signy accessorized with this gains Lancer constant. Constant Lancer.
That's true.
And then for Soft-Boiled Egg, it's if this Signy that is accessorized would leave the field, you may exclude this from the game instead. If you do, down that Signy. So it's kind of similar to H2O, where you can take the card from under it. In this case, it would be the attached accessory, and exclude the accessory from the game, down that Signy, and gets to stay on your field.
Yes, and it's worth mentioning that it gets downed.
Yes.
So if you put it in an open lane, you are going to attack with it, you do not get to attack with it.
It also says leave the field. It does not say specifically vanished or moved to a different thing.
Yes, which if
is that a translation thing, though?
No. It says if it leaves the field, right? Like, so if it would be vanished, it doesn't. If it gets other things, it doesn't. I think negative effects still kill it. And I think that if it's vanished through battle, it still gets killed. But anyone who's a commenter, go ahead and go down in the comments right then and there and tell me if I'm wrong or not. I know you're somewhere around. Go for it. Go for it. Head judge, go for it.
Judge. Judge. Yeah, please feel free to correct us in the comments section down below. It is pretty fun to play with, though. It gives you a lot of flexibility in the deck, which is not common with green decks. Especially the buffing one and the Lancer one. Anytime you can give green Lancer on demand, it's a good thing.
Plus 10,000, let's talk about them a bit. Plus 10,000 is enough to make any 3,000 that you have 13k. 13k is a notable number because aside from it kills most things, it's also not going to get vanished by a lot of red or black effects. And that is notable.
Yes.
Lancer is notable because Lancer is awesome. Outside of Lancer being awesome, it doesn't have to be a green Signy. You can put it on any Signy. There's a bunch of Signies that would love to get it. Like I said, Phalaris is one of them, but that's not it. There's also, like, for example, Chandelier would love to get it, right? Not only am I going to trash that Signy, I'm going to still hit you for damage. Same thing with Yukimi. I'm going to trash your Signy, but I'm also going to hit you for damage.
Right.
And there's, like, other stuff, too. Like, for example, Osagetsu might like it. You put Osagetsu in front of the, level 5,000 Signy, but then take out something
at
else.
Once and still crush a live cloth.
You got it.
God, that would be brutal.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of ones. Another one that might like it is stuff like, there's some blue stuff that says when you vanish an opponent's Signy, you make the opponent discard a card at random. Hijikata. So giving it Lancers, one of those cool things that you can do.
All right.
And then we've got the other one, which is probably the most powerful, but also the hardest one to play, which is the Soft-Boiled Egg.
Yeah. I mean, this is just basically, like, I do not want the Signy to leave my field at all.
Yeah, I mean, like, putting that on, like, for example, a Phalaris, putting that on a Exia, putting that on a Koella is really annoying.
Yeah.
Right? You put it down and you go like, this isn't going anywhere, and the opponent's gonna have to deal with it for their next turn, which is why it's pretty good on Exia.
Just know that if something makes a Signy annoying, it makes it powerful.
Yeah.
And this makes Signies annoying.
We've operated mostly under the assumption that, like, your Signy exist only for a half a turn, right? They only exist during your turn and then they disappear, right?
Yeah.
And this breaks that normal flow of the game, which makes it exceptionally powerful.
Yes.
You do have to pay an enter for all of these times that you're going to put these craft Signy on things.
Yeah, but with a green deck and building the enter charging into the deck, it probably won't feel like much of a cost.
Sure. It's also worth mentioning that the other reason that balances out kind of well is this gets access to coins.
Oh, yeah.
And coins can save you on enter.
Yeah, it's basically another form of, like, free currency, in the same way that exceeding is a form of currency. It's a limited form of currency, but it's not coming out of your enter.
Yeah, and it's once per game is like that you can't do spells or
action
abilities.
It's not bad.
Remember that attaching a soul is an action ability, so, like, for example, that's another good one that you can do.
Yeah.
But it's basically on the turn that you're like, I need to make sure I live to the next turn.
Yes.
That's probably when you use it. It's not great. It's okay.
Speaking of Signies in main decks, let's move on to some of the Signies that you would be seeing.
Yeah, so you're gonna have Bang in there, being that Bang energizes you, and like I said, the deck needs some more energize. And then look at that, you got Chiron and Centurion, both cards that say energize. Arguably, Centurion is better than Chiron in this deck because
Why is that?
Because you can put it in any of the lanes. It doesn't have to be in the center
That's
lane.
true. However, Chiron does it for free and Centurion does not.
Correct. That is true.
That's the caveat with that.
But like, if you're not using the coins, why are you getting the coins?
I mean, that's fair as well.
Yeah.
There's not a whole lot of coin support, but that doesn't mean that there won't be.
Yeah, notice I skipped Centurion's ability, which is green, put this in the trash, and then vanish to level 3. It exists. It's fine. You can do it.
It's there if you want to do it.
If you're doing it and it's not the late game, it's not great for you.
Sure. Yeah, probably just green. This does not really. That's not an aggro card. Like, don't misread that. That's definitely like I'll do this later.
Yeah, it's also a 5,000 power, which does matter. 5,000 is better than 3,000 in my opinion. Dies to less things.
That's true.
So that's like, there's your enter. There's your green cards that you're going to be doing. If we go on to the next one, which is the pieces here, and you'll see stuff like Super Celestia Saber, Energy Door, MC Line Disrespect, right? Like, these are you may be going with some other thing, but the MC Line Disrespect basically just says some kind of defensive Elrig that costs a fair amount of
It's
enter.
a 3-stop, yeah.
And then you'll see Energy Door costing 3, and also Super Celestia Saber costing 2. It's a green deck. It can afford to pay those costs.
Yeah.
Not to mention, Energy Door can arguably make itself cost 1, which is cool.
That is a good thing. We love pieces that end up paying for themselves.
You also see Super Celestia Saber and the Energy Door basically prevent Elrig damage to you, which just pushes you towards that, like, I'm going to keep going. If this game keeps going, I'm just going to attrition you out.
Yep.
And then we jump into, like, kind of the aggressiveness of the deck. You're going to be seeing stuff like Parajulius, and then Osagetsune, and then the Signy, or the
back fat.
Yeah, that gives you Lancer. So you're going to be relying on these kind of things. I've said this before with DXM, right? And other things, is if you can get a soul to last longer than one turn, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So, like,
yeah, really get that bang for your buck.
So if you can get that, if you can get that Lancer to stick around for an extra turn, it's gonna go miles to helping you finish out your damage. And then you see here, this is some more options that you're gonna be seeing in the deck. This is basically just different deck directions you can take. They're all kind of valid here.
I mean, yeah, and do remember that we're talking about a non-mono green deck.
Right.
So you will want to be pairing it with other colors. Black and white probably being one of our stronger recommended colors, but blue is also possible as well.
Yeah, so let's take a look at them. Right? So black gives you access to Phalaris, Pasta type Dre.
It's Patra type Dre.
Someone said recently that they heard someone say put down a card and be like Pasta, or put down a card and say Georgia, and I love that
you're
we're doing
ruining them.
So
it is very dangerous.
Patra type Dre, and then this one is Ogana, I think is the name of it. So it's a level. It's a pretty good one. It's a black level 1 that you can discard a black card from your hand and give something negative 3,000. So it gives the deck a little more damage push. But the ones that really are worth mentioning here are the Phalaris and the Patra, right? So Patra gives you more like stability with your deck because you're able to take stuff out of the trash and put it into play. But you've got that plus 10,000, and that's normally a pretty defensive thing. But when you
pair it with Patra,
it's basically you can pay 1 enter and then give something negative 10,000. And if it sticks around your next turn somehow, you can do it again.
Yep.
So it ends up
also, like, peep at the costs for Patra. Like, you have a black cost and or a green cost.
Yeah.
So that pairs very well with this type of deck.
Yeah, and Phalaris, we talked about it, Lancer's nasty on it.
Oh, God, it's so rude.
Your other choices here, if you bring white into the equation, right, you get Exia.
Exias are good.
And you get Yuki. Yuki's really good.
Are really good.
Yeah, Yuki's really good because you can turn things that, like, for example, the 15k remember back into a 12k.
Yep.
And then your Lancer will pierce through. And Exia is really good if you put the thing on it, the egg that allows it to not get killed.
As if Exia wasn't hard enough to get rid of.
Right. And then if you decide you want to go with Blue, Madoka Clap is better than MC Line Disrespect. Downing things is better in a Tama format. And then Hakat is 0 investment to manipulate the top cards of your deck and try to get yourself guards and things you need longer. I will admit, though, that something that probably should have been on there is Donna. Donna pays 3 coins, and then you get a free Haniel. And Green really, really likes that.
Yes. Those are some very good pairings. Here's kind of our sample deck list that you guys can go through. Pause on this if you want to take a closer look.
Yeah, look, there's 3 Donna in there, like I was saying.
There they go.
So yeah, I like white a little bit more than I like blue, but I think blue is a perfectly reasonable thing to put in here instead of white.
It really depends. Honestly, what that's going to come down to is how you prefer to play the deck. Whether you're going to skew blue or skew white.
Yeah.
For us, we tend to skew black, white, green.
Yeah, I like the pieces that you get better with black and white added in. Donna's a pretty cool L-rig to use, assist L-rig to use. But I do think it's probably mandatory to play black when you're playing green, just because the 2 colors naturally pair really well with each other.
They hum together very nicely. And for those of you that have played green-black decks, you'll kind of know what we're talking about. They seem to be a natural pair.
Yeah.
All right, going on to our next deck.
DXM.
Oh, we knew it was coming.
Yeah, I mean, someone in the comment was asking if we put a DXM thing, and I was like,
Here
yeah, it's coming.
Here it is.
So here's some pros. I think everyone's played DXM before, but we'll go into it because this is the primer, and we are giving a wide berth of options here. The pros are it's fast.
It is fast.
It is fast. It's got silver bullets in it.
It does have that.
And there's evasion in it.
Ugh.
You know, Assassin's a pretty good ability.
The cons are, however, it has a limited window of push. It's a really static Larig deck. I mean, that is very true. And it falters to the classic 3-stop problem.
Yeah. Okay. So going over it real quick, fast. It's not like Dash Urana fast, but
yeah, that's crazy.
It can still clean up a game pretty quickly.
Yes.
Like if you're like your opponent, you're like, oh, I haven't found my guard real quick that much. Oof, I'm searching for a guard. Nope, didn't find it. It can clean you up.
Yeah.
You're like, all right, well, sorry.
Yeah, it really does feel like you're getting like punched in the face a bunch.
Yeah.
And as far as the silver bullets, like there are multiple ways that DXM in various forms, depending on the center, they have lots of ways to push through damage and just like clean up games.
And just ignore what your opponent's putting, right? Like Tengu can just be like, I don't care that you got Madoka Clap, I'm punching you.
Yep.
It's a hard deck to play, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's kind of dipped in popularity a bit, is I think a lot of people who maybe are capable of playing those decks have moved on to maybe other decks to be played. But if you are looking for a deck where you can really think through your turns and maximize out what you're doing, but also be an aggro deck, this is the deck to still use. And then evasion is just like Assassin gets around a lot of problems in Wixoss, right?
It does.
Like if you got an Xe on the other side of the board, cool, evasion, right? You got an H2 on the other side of the board, cool, evasion. There's only a couple cards that deal with Assassin, like Coella is one of the only things that deal with Assassin. You've got some other white Signy that kind of deal with things like vanillaing things out. Like you could maybe hit a Life Burst that puts a Yuki into play. You could be playing Ant Nest, which will do it too, is an annoying card.
Yes.
But like you're probably putting your other level 2 slots to things, so it's like, you can't always count on those things.
Right. Now for the cons, let's go over those a bit, because I know that DXM on paper sounds like the biggest, baddest deck out there.
Yeah.
Which when it first came out, it kind of was, but now that we're a little bit more familiar with the deck, we have noticed a couple of pitfalls with it.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by it's got a limited window of push?
So unlike some of these other late game decks, like it does feel like DXM has a magazine of bullets, right? Like it's like cool, I've got my limited ammo, right? This DXM deck can only shoot eight bullets. And when you're out of, those bullets or whatever, it's probably more like it can shoot 10 or 16 bullets. And we're out of those bullets, you're out of ammo.
That's true.
You will not do more damage.
There is a very hard wall with DXM in terms of, right, I'm doing it, I'm out.
I'm out. Yeah. When you're out of ammo, you're out of ammo for this deck. The really static Elrig deck is that basically, like, because it's team, you know what you're playing against.
Yes, that's true. So you're saying that it's a little bit predictable as well from, like, an opponent's standpoint?
Yeah, because also if you're playing Deus, like, depending on what assists you're playing, Deus X and Machina, there's very few that are good, right? Deus, what Deus are you playing? What Deus level 2? There's only one. It's Shield. Yeah. Right? What Machina are you playing? There's two of them. There's Binds, and then occasionally you see...
You'll see, like, Bind and Smash.
Bind and Smash, and occasionally you'll see the one that, like, puts something in your life cloth.
Right.
And then X, it's like X cross out. That's it.
Right.
That's the only one. So,
that's true.
So, like, it's static. You know what you're playing against. You can play around it.
So what about the 3-stop problem? Are you saying that it can't play around Clap or MC Lion very well?
I mean, it kind of can, right? It can enter burn the opponent. Generally speaking, it enter burns the opponent under 5. But
which is kind of the magic number.
It's
for
really
those
hard
two.
to enter the opponent down to 1, so they can't 3-stop. So you're probably going to get 2-stopped no matter what.
Yeah.
And if that's the best thing that you can do as an aggro deck, that's a Welpy situation. Like, ugh. And not only that, like, you can set yourself up in a situation where the opponent puts out like an X and has still, like, even if you can't 3-stop, it can 2-stop. You're like, well, this sucks for me, right? I'll blow my assassin this turn, and then they do something like they 1-stop you and they kill the thing that has assassin, and then you only get in 1 damage, and then you're running out of bullets later. You know, like, this is the problem sometimes with this 3-stop situation.
I see. So it's kind of like, yes, you have silver bullets, but each one of them matter.
Yep.
You got to
make sure your shots count.
Yes. 1 shot, 1 kill, essentially.
Yep.
All right, let's take a look at the rigs in the deck. I mean, very predictable. You know, we're looking at a team setup here. So we got X3 and Deus 3. What about Machina 3?
Yeah, you're not really gonna see Machina in a DXM deck. You're gonna see mostly a Deus lead or a X lead.
In our opinion, Machina is a much stronger assist than she is a center.
Absolutely. Even if Machina's center was stronger, you'd be like, I want to play this in the assist line.
Yeah.
And you're going to be playing basically this. This is your game plan. Deal damage and crush some life cloth with trigger victory, and also bring some of your silver bullets back to your hand. And then going more into sort of like the damage dealing, which is the next slide here. You can see all the different ways that you can deal damage, right? The Souls deal damage, Nobunaga deals damage, Lancelot deals damage, Ramel deals damage, the Ogana deals damage.
Ogana, yeah.
That's a really big upgrade for the Deus aggro version of the deck.
You put the fancy Lancelot in there.
I did put the fancy Lancelot in there. The one from the starter deck that it's from.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So that's its damage output. It's got quite a bit. Then you'll see the next slide here talks about various different ways that you can ignore what the opponent's doing. Right? Thoroughbred ignores discard because it gets Tengu out of the trash. Tengu, when it's powered up, which is easy to do in X, will not be able to be downed. And that gets around Madoka Clap specifically. Lalaru gets around all the white Elrigs that say cannot attack. Because that's a thing that the Signy gains, therefore Lalaru can't get things from your opponents. Tama, the black Signy, basically says, I have Shadow Life Burst. So it's probably what you're going to wait for to attack last with, so that way if they hit a Life Burst, it doesn't really matter for Tama. And then Kentoki is a way to get around just cards, right? Like it's got gets Assassin on demand.
It gets Assassin, doesn't it? Doesn't it enter burn as well?
Also enter burns, so that can stop a 3-stop. Yep.
All right.
And also worth mentioning, Thoroughbred team pumps, which means they can get around things like the Madoka Smash, or not Madoka Smash, excuse me, Machina Smash.
Machina Smash, correct. So this is our sample deck list. Take a look. What do you guys think? It's pretty straightforward, I think.
Yeah,
if you've played against like a center X or center Deus before, like none of our choices should surprise you, save for the few that will be coming out in the next set.
Yeah, and I mean, like, a lot of those, you'll see a bunch of one-ofs. A lot of those are, mix and match to your heart's desire to get something. Like, notice that there's a one-off flat throw in it. There's a one-off Eresh in it.
Yeah, the Eresh Kagal's was such a shocker to me.
Well, that's like one of those things.
That card is chaos incarnate.
If your opponent puts down two X's and is like, get by this, you can be like, cool, Eresh Kagal, attack.
I hope it works.
I win, or whatever. So, like, yeah, like, there's a bunch of different little silver bullets in here. You can mix match as you need to.
All right. Now we're getting into Atomic.
Yeah, this is our last deck for this episode. There will be one more in the series.
Please subscribe for part 3 coming up later.
So Atomic was a boogeyman of the Japanese format, but in America we've kind of figured out how to beat it. So it's like, because we're all a bunch of sweaty tryhards here in America. So it's not as bad as you think it would be. The Atomic deck has a bunch of things going for it, though, which are still quite strong, which is that it's just got a lot of strong cards in it. But let's talk about the pros and cons.
All right, for pros for Atomic, we've got almost unlimited removal. Oh boy, that's going to come in handy. Defensive board positioning and strong discard. So going back to, us talking about that, some of the strongest disruptions that we've been seeing in the format lately has been discard, and Atomic has that. However, some of the cons are that the hand size is going to matter. The discard wars are tough, so if you're going to be going up against another discard deck, be prepared. And the assists are stretched thin.
Yeah.
So going through the pros, almost unlimited removal. What?
Yeah.
You just yes.
Yeah.
Just yes.
You played the Atomic deck, you know what I'm talking about.
I mean, I do. Yeah. There's a lot of... There is a lot of removal in that deck.
You're like, souls, cool. That's it? Nope. I have a Signy that can come back from the trash at any point in time. Whenever I attach a soul to it, it just does extra damage.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. What else do you got? Oh, there's a ton of different ways that I can deal damage with the Atomic Signy that discards stuff from your hand and open up lanes. Cool, is that it? No, there's also Caesar. Right, like the deck can pull silver bullets out of its deck, and one of them is Caesar, and it's like, okay, well, not only that, it gets Assassin on demand, which is like, wait, but I thought this was a black-blue deck. Yep, also gets Assassin.
Ugh. And it has strong discards. There's a lot of cards in the deck that will help to discard down your opponent, which is great when you're running a deck like this, because then they have less card advantage. So they don't have as many answers to deal with all the utter ridiculousness you're throwing at them.
Yeah, and generally speaking, right, like your discard is not plentiful, but it's strong. So really your turn 3 is probably going to make your opponent discard 4-ish cards, which could be their whole hand, right? You're going to rip that apart. After that, you're going to start running out of discard, but it is worth mentioning that discard is particularly strong when you can get an opponent's hand from like 5 cards to 0 cards. Rather than if you can do 5 discard over the course of 5 turns, right? That's not that powerful. So it is powerful in the fact that it's kind of a burst discard.
Right. And then as far as defensive board positioning, there's going to be a turn where you're going to have 3 level 3s on the board.
Yeah, for some.
I don't
some
really
of them,
know how much more defensive you can get.
Right, so like half of the Atomic decks are going to be running Yuka Yuka as an assist line, which allows them to put out a field of 3/3/3. We talk about how strong 3/3/1 is.
Yeah.
You can only imagine how strong 3/3/3 is.
3/3/3.
You go like, yeah, would you like to destroy one of my 3s? Then on your turn, you still have to deal with 2 of them. And they're defensive, right? You've got Exia as one of the options. You can have Coella sometimes as an options, but mostly you're going to be seeing H2Os. And H2Os are just really difficult to deal with. Not only are they 13Ks, but they're 13Ks that also don't, like, it's hard to get rid of them because of H2O's ability.
Yes. Now, as far as the cons, why does hand size matter in this deck?
You going up and down in hand size all the time because the Atomic gimmick is that, like, you are discarding cards to make its effect go. So because of that, you're going up and down in hand size all the time. It's also worth mentioning that, like, H2O is a Rise Signy, which means that in order to play it, you need to play another card. So it almost is like costs
Yes.
a card.
Yes, that is something that you want to think about with Rise Signies. Same thing with like something like Nobunaga or like Anna Mirage. They're basically spells because they're not actual Signies.
Yeah.
Like you have to have a Signy to play a Signy. So that does kind of mess with your card advantage a little bit.
So yeah, and you get in this scenario too where your hand fluctuates like a ton. Like I remember literally at the ceremony where I was playing Atomic, I was like, let me see how many cards do I have in my hand. I've got 12 cards in my hand. Cool. Let me play out my turn. I have now 5 cards in my hand. It's like, you were like, wait, but I had 12. What happened to 7 of those cards? And I was like, I played them.
It's like an accordion. Like you're just expanding and contracting and expanding and contracting, which brings us to our next con, which is what makes discard wars really tough. Because if people start messing with your hand on top of the fact that you have to use your hand for additional costs, it's gonna make things very, very difficult.
You surprisingly get pretty low on hand late in the game. Like its attrition is not actually all that great. Like you'll be playing up against a green deck and you'll be like, wait, I think I should be winning. Why do I have less enter and less cards in hand than you? I'm the blue deck. But like
Sad panda.
that's one of the things. And then your assist line is pretty stretched thin, which is like true. You have to devote a fair amount of your assist line to helping you keep your hand size up, and because of that, you actually have less defensive assist than you'd want. That is the crutch that Atomic Deus plays, is that it can't keep a hand very well, and it needs to supplement that. So if it can't supplement it, you might be in for a bad time as an Atomic player.
Now, what about the assists? Because the assists are pretty important. You're saying that they're being stretched thin in this deck. Why is that?
So you basically end up with 2 choices here as an Atomic player. There's other choices that you can make for sure, but the 2 choices that you end up with are either Yuka Yuka, which allows you to do the 3/3 turn, but also allows you to draw a ton of cards. Right, that line itself can draw you 4 cards on its own. But the other thing that you can do is you can run probably the Machina line. And if you run the Machina line, then you end up with lane opening, but at probably sacrificing a color. So we talk about the Atomic decks, right? Like Deus is the one that we mentioned the most, but there is 2 other really viable options for Atomic.
Yeah, you got Madoka and Miko Miko, which, by the way, the witch hat on like the protractor, or I guess it's not really a protractor, whatever. It's just awesome.
Yeah, it is super cute.
It is awesome, cute, and hilarious. I love it.
So Miko Miko is not normally a pretty good center because it depends on your opponents to make mistakes for you to get like good benefit off of it. But the deck is really hungry for cards in hand. Miko's ability of basically drawing 2 cards unless your opponent discards a card, they're not going to usually discard something, so you'll draw cards instead. That helps you.
That will help to refill your hand. But yeah, by far the most popular one is Deus 3.
Yeah. And then the diagram one here, Madoka, you're not playing diagram, basically allows you to... Oh, no, I made a mistake here. I should have put down the other Madoka.
Whoopsies.
This is Madoka level 1, or the Madoka first version. The second version basically lets you filter through your hand, and if you have more cards in hand than the opponent, you can bottom deck their stuff. It's just good having extra removal for it. But generally speaking, this is the way that you do it. Plus, Adams does end up trying to mill the opponent a little bit, so its effect of being able to draw a card and make the opponent discard a card every turn helps mill.
Yes.
So it's an option.
So we are talking about, this is supposed to be Madoka V2.
Yes, I just didn't put that down there.
All right, let's take a look at some of the Signy. We've got Pennsylvania, Natural Element.
Yeah.
I forget the name already.
Black Phosphorus, or are you talking about Ogana?
Ogana, sorry. Ogana.
Yeah, you got BP, which is Natural Element, and you've got Ogana. Ogana's the new one.
That's the new one. Sorry, I can't read Japanese.
They all basically say the same thing, which is that you can discard a card from your hand, discard a couple cards from your hand, discard some amount of cards from your hand, make the opponent have negative effects.
Yay.
Yeah.
It's all pretty straightforward.
There's your Signy offense line.
So basically, you discard stuff, you give negative effects, it can turn into removal, basically.
Bingo.
So you're discarding for removal.
And then we're talking about like the next slide, which is the defensive board state that we were talking about. So you see Exias here. Garden of Singularity often pops up. If you're manipulating the flow of your hand anyways, Garden of Singularity is a clever option that you can use to basically supplement you having guards.
Yeah, it's not bad.
There have been games where I've played Garden of Singularity and I've used its effect 4 times. Like, it was just nuts. But that has a lot to do with, again, some of the ways that you're supplementing cards in your hand would be stuff like H2O's Life Burst, for example, which allows you to draw 2 cards and put a Signy, specifically an Atom Signy, into play. The reason why I put that BP over there and snuck it into the side is because that Life Burst can stop 2 lanes then, right? Not only can you put the BP out to block one of the lanes, you can also then use its effect to kill a different Signy, which means that you may have an opponent who wiped out your field, got nothing on there. They attack for 1 damage. You put this out here, stop the second damage, then kill the third Signy. Boom. You are very likely going to win that game. Yes. It's a very defensive board state. Like, between all of the things that H2O can do, it's one of the few decks that's like, yeah, I make it your life nightmarish on your turn.
Yeah, H2O is annoying. All right, moving on. We've got Random Drain. It's a classic blue staple.
Yep.
I mean, it makes your opponent discard. It lets you draw a card. The Life Burst is also very good.
Yeah. What's the theme here? What do they all do?
They all draw you cards.
And they all discard your opponent as well.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean that's the goal, right? Like, the deck doesn't have a ton of discard, but what it does have is strong.
Yes, for sure. Especially with the pairing between H2 Natural Element and H2O Natural Element Queen, because H2 has the if it's risen, your opponent discards a card
At random. Random part's
that's
nice.
The important part, because then you
Sniping.
can snipe a guard. All right, so here's our sample deck list. No, not too many surprises here. It's actually a very streamlined deck. Like, there's very few one-ofs in this deck.
Yeah, you kind of want the like specific type of stuff. You'll notice that if you count the amount of the atoms, you hover around from 16 to 18, generally speaking. And 20 is probably the safest number to go at, but you don't need to have any more than 20. With atoms, it's kind of nice that it's like kind of almost a package, not necessarily a deck. I've seen some Japanese decks go as low as only running 4 H2Os, 4 H2s, and like 4 of the multicolors, and be like, 12's enough.
Ooh.
And they do it.
All right, sure, whatever. And then Xenocluster is also going to help bolster you against any sort of like discard v discard stuff, outside of being able to pay for Deus 3's once a game ability, right, if you don't end up using it.
Yeah, and that's kind of the strong thing about Deus once a game, right? Is that like against a deck where you need the Xenocluster, need the Garden of Singularity, cool, you got access to it. But both of those are really strong in different matchups, generally speaking. So the matchup that it's not strong in, you get rid of the other piece.
Yep.
That's how kind of the Deus Atoms deck works.
Honestly, it's been a deck that we've really enjoyed playing. I'm a little partial to Cosmos, but that's a totally different deck.
Yeah, totally. So anyways, that's it for this one. If you want to check out our episode 3, it'll come out sometime soon. And we'll be talking about the last couple decks, which is basically just the stuff that we haven't touched on. There's like mono white aggro in there, for example, as well as a bunch of just rando decks that we won't go into super depth about, but they have a chance of showing up.
Yeah,
and
you never know.
You might want to be prepped for it.
Yes. All right. With that said, thank you so much for listening, fellow selectors. If you liked our podcast, please make sure that you subscribe. Check out our community tab, because we often have announcements and polls up there where you can vote to see what decks we're going to be running for our Versus series. So please make sure you check that out. Please subscribe, and may you always flip a Life Burst.